A three-legged puppy begs for help every morning. But the reason why made the vet burst into tears. Every single dawn, this broken little dog shows up, crying, refusing food, desperately trying to lead someone into the unknown. At first, it looks like a mystery of survival, until the truth hiding behind his pain reveals something far darker than anyone could imagine. Why does this injured puppy risk everything day after day? What secret is he guarding? And when the truth finally comes out, will it save an innocent life or destroy the only hope left? Your comments and presence here remind me why I tell these stories. If you still believe in the healing strength of love, truth, and quiet courage, then you're the reason this channel exists. Clara Whitmore stood at her front door, clutching her morning coffee as she peered down at the unexpected visitor, who had once again appeared on her worn welcome mat. The scruffy, three-legged puppy sat there, his golden-brown fur matted and dirty, looking up at her with pleading eyes that seemed to hold more wisdom than any animal should possess. "Well, here we are again," she said softly, setting her coffee mug on the small table beside the door. This had become their strange morning ritual over the past week, the puppy appearing just as the sun crept over the Kentucky hills, whimpering and scratching at her door. Clara reached for the bowl of dog food she'd started keeping by the entrance. "At least let me feed you properly this time." But just like every other morning, the puppy backed away from the offered food, his tail wagging frantically as he hopped toward the gravel driveway, then turned to look at her expectantly. "I don't understand what you want," Clara sighed, running, a hand through her shoulder-length brown hair. The morning air felt crisp against her skin, making her pull her cardigan tighter around herself. The puppy let out a sharp bark, then limped a few more steps away, his three legs working overtime to maintain balance. Each morning, the scene played out the same way, the scratching, the whimpering, the urgent backwards glances as he tried to lead her somewhere. Clara had initially dismissed it as typical stray behavior, but there was something different about this pup's persistence, something that nagged at the edges of her mind. "This isn't normal," she muttered to herself, watching as the puppy continued his desperate dance of approach and retreat. Her husband Tom had always said animals could sense things humans couldn't, one of the many bits of wisdom she'd stored away from their years together before his passing. The thought of Tom made her chest tighten, as it always did. He would have known what to do about this mysterious visitor. He wouldn't have spent days wondering and worrying like she had. After watching the puppy's increasingly frustrated attempts to communicate for what felt like the 100th time, Clara made a decision. "Okay, little one, let's figure out what's going on with you." She grabbed her car keys from the hook by the door, slipped on her shoes, and approached the puppy slowly. To her surprise, he didn't run away this time, but stood perfectly still, as if understanding that she was finally going to help. Clara carefully scooped him up, noticing how he trembled slightly in her arms despite his apparent trust. "We're going to see Dr. Granger," she told him, carrying him to her old blue sedan. "He'll know what to make of you." The local veterinarian had a reputation for being both skilled and compassionate, rare qualities in their small town where many viewed animals as mere property. The drive to the veterinary clinic took 15 minutes, during which the puppy sat quietly in the passenger seat, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that he understood exactly where they were going. Dr. Lionel Granger's clinic was a modest building on the outskirts of town, its white paint slightly faded but the windows sparkling clean. As Clara parked, she noticed the doctor himself working in the small garden beside the building, his sleeves rolled up despite the morning chill. He looked up at the sound of her car door closing, a warm smile crossing his weathered face. "Clara Whitmore," he called out, brushing dirt from his hands. "It's been a while since I've seen you around here." "Good morning, Dr. Granger," Clara replied, carefully lifting the puppy from the car. I've got a bit of a mystery on my hands. Please, call me Lionel, he said, approaching them. His kind eyes took in the three-legged puppy with professional interest. And who's this little fellow? Clara explained the strange morning visits, the puppy's refusal of food, and his persistent attempts to lead her somewhere. As she spoke, she noticed how Lionel's expression grew more thoughtful, his forehead creasing with concern. Let's take him inside and have a proper look, he suggested, holding the clinic door open for her. The small waiting room was empty this early in the morning, smelling of disinfectant and pet shampoo. You know, Lionel said as he led them into an examination room, animals often have ways of telling us things we might otherwise miss. Their instincts can be remarkably accurate. He gently placed the puppy on the examination table, his hands moving with practiced care as he began checking the dog's condition. Clara watched, noting how the puppy remained unusually calm under the doctor's touch. I've never seen anything quite like this behavior before, she admitted. It's as if he's trying to tell me something important, but I just can't figure out what it is. Lionel nodded, his fingers carefully parting the matted fur. Sometimes, he said thoughtfully, we need to trust that there's more going on than what we can immediately understand. This little guy has clearly been through something traumatic. The missing leg isn't a birth defect. It's a recent amputation and not a professional one at that. Clara felt her heart sink at his words. Poor thing, she whispered, reaching out to stroke the puppy's head. He leaned into her touch, those intelligent eyes never leaving her face. Clara watched anxiously as Dr. Lionel Granger ran his experienced hands over the three-legged puppy's thin frame. The small examination room smelled of antiseptic and pet, shampoo, while morning sunlight streamed through the window's half-drawn blinds. He's definitely been through quite an ordeal, Dr. Granger said, his kind eyes crinkling with concern. He was in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and gentle hands that seemed to put even the most nervous animals at ease. These scars here? He pointed to several marks on the puppy's left side. They're consistent with trap injuries. Poor fellow must have gotten caught and managed to escape. Clara's heart ached. That explains the missing leg. Most likely. Doctor, Granger carefully examined the healed amputation site. He's also severely undernourished. I can feel every rib. He reached for his stethoscope, but before he could place it against the puppy's chest, the little dog suddenly sprang to life. With surprising strength, the puppy leaped off the examination table. Clara reached for him, but he dodged her grasp and darted toward the door, scratching frantically at the wood. Whoa there, little fella! Dr. Granger moved to block the exit, but the puppy slipped between his legs as soon as he opened the door, racing down the clinic's hallway. Oh, no! Clara hurried after him, her sensible shoes squeaking against the linoleum floor. Behind her, she could hear Dr. Granger following close behind. The puppy reached the clinic's back door and began barking urgently, his whole body trembling with intensity. A veterinary technician opened the door to see what was causing the commotion, and the three-legged dog shot through the opening like a furry bullet. We can't let him get away, Clara called out, pushing through the door into the bright morning sun. The puppy waited at the edge of the parking lot, barking continuously until he saw them emerge. Then he took off down a narrow back road that wound behind the clinic. Wait! Dr. Granger caught up to Clara, slightly out of breath. Let me grab my medical bag. Whatever's going on with this little guy, he seems determined to show us something. Clara nodded gratefully as the veterinarian ducked back inside. The puppy had stopped a short distance away, sitting perfectly still, but watching them with an intensity that made her shiver despite the warm morning. Dr. Granger returned moments later, his black medical bag in hand. Ready? Together, they followed, the puppy as he led them down the back road. The pavement soon gave way to gravel, and tall grass swayed on either side of them in the morning breeze. The puppy maintained a steady pace, checking frequently to ensure they were still following. I've never seen anything quite like this, Dr. Granger admitted as they walked. Animals can be remarkably intelligent, but this level of purposeful behavior is unusual. Clara wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead. He's been trying to get me to follow him for days. Every morning, same routine, showing up at my door, refusing food, just scratching and whining until I'd acknowledge him. The gravel crunched under their feet as they continued following their three-legged guide. The road curved around a thick stand of oak trees, leading them further from the familiar surroundings of town. Clara felt her anxiety growing with each step that took them away from safety, but something in the puppy's determined demeanor kept her moving forward. "Should we be concerned?" she asked, glancing at Dr. Granger. He shook his head slowly, though his expression was thoughtful. The puppy doesn't seem aggressive or distressed, just incredibly focused. In my 30 years of veterinary practice, I've heard stories about animals leading humans to people or animals in trouble. They have instincts we don't fully understand. The puppy had stopped again, looking back at them with what Clara could have sworn was impatience. His single front paw pawed at the ground, and his bark echoed off the surrounding trees. "He's certainly guiding us somewhere specific," Dr. Granger observed, adjusting his grip on his medical bag. "And whatever it is, he thinks it's important. Enough to seek help not just from you, but to make sure we followed him from the clinic as well." They pressed on, the morning sun climbing higher in the sky. Clara was grateful she'd worn comfortable shoes, though she hadn't expected her visit to the vet to turn into a cross-country hike. The puppy maintained his steady pace ahead of them, his determination never wavering. As they rounded another bend in the road, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led into something bigger than themselves. Whatever secret this brave little three-legged puppy was about to reveal, it was clear he'd been working tirelessly to bring the right people to the right place at the right time. Dr. Granger seemed to sense her unease. "We're in this together, Mrs. Whitmore. Whatever we find, we'll handle it as a team." The puppy's urgent barking pulled their attention forward once again, as he continued leading them deeper into the Kentucky countryside, away from the safety and familiarity of town. The gravel path gradually narrowed into a dirt trail, winding through increasingly dense woodland. After another 10 minutes of walking, the puppy suddenly broke into an urgent run, leading them around a final bend where an old hunting cabin came into view. The structure stood alone in a small clearing, its weathered wood almost gray with age and neglect. "Look at that place," Clara whispered, taking in the sagging roof and broken window. "It looks abandoned." The puppy reached the cabin's warped wooden door first, scratching frantically at its base while letting out high-pitched whines. His single front paw worked desperately against the wood, leaving marks on its already damaged surface. Dr. Granger approached cautiously, examining the door. "There's a padlock here, but it looks like the wood around it is rotting." He pressed his shoulder against the door, and Clara quickly moved to help him. Together, they pushed until the deteriorated wood around the lock gave way with a sharp crack. The door swung open with a prolonged creak, releasing a wave of stale air. The puppy darted inside immediately, his nails clicking against the wooden floor. As Clara's eyes adjusted to the dim interior, her heart nearly stopped, huddled. In the corner on a thin, dirty blanket was a small boy. His clothes hung loose on his thin frame, and his wide eyes reflected terror as he looked up at them. The puppy had rushed to his side, frantically licking his face. "Oh, my God," Clara gasped, rushing forward. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" The boy tried to speak but could barely manage a whisper. His lips were cracked from dehydration, and his skin felt clammy when Clara touched his forehead. Dr. Granger knelt beside them, quickly opening his medical bag. "I'm Dr. Granger's son. Can you tell me your name?" Eli, the boy managed, his voice barely audible. "Eli Barrett." Clara felt as though ice water had been poured down her spine. The Barrett name was infamous in their community, particularly Harlan Barrett, the wealthy land baron whose influence stretched across 3 counties. His reputation for ruthlessness was well known, but this was beyond cruel. While Dr. Granger began examining Eli, Clara retrieved a water bottle from the doctor's bag. She helped Eli take small sips, supporting his head as he drank. "Your grandfather did this?" Clara asked gently, though she already knew the answer. Everyone knew Harlan Barrett had taken in his orphaned grandson after his daughter's death, but the community rarely saw the boy. Tears welled up in Eli's eyes as he nodded. He found out about Scout," he whispered, reaching for the three-legged puppy who hadn't left his side. "I've been feeding him in secret for weeks. Grandpa hates dogs. When he caught me..." His voice broke off as a sob shook his small frame. "He locked you in here?" Dr. Granger's voice was tight with controlled anger. As he checked Eli's vital signs, Eli nodded again. 3 days ago, said he'd teach me about disobedience." He clutched Scout closer, burying his face in the dog's fur. "But Scout got away. He's been trying to get help." Clara felt sick to her stomach. The puppy's desperate attempts to get her attention, his persistence in leading them here. It all made terrible sense now. For days, this brave little dog had been trying to save the boy who had shown him kindness. "He's severely dehydrated," Dr. Granger reported, his professional demeanor masking the anger Clara could see in his eyes. "We need to get him to a hospital right away." As if on cue, they heard the distant sound of tires on gravel. Clara's heart jumped into her throat as she peered through the broken window. A black luxury car was making its way down the trail toward the cabin. "It's him," Eli whispered, terror filling his voice. "It's Grandpa. He comes to check every morning." Scout began to growl, positioning himself protectively in front of Eli. Clara looked at Dr. Granger, seeing her own determination reflected in his face. They had stumbled onto something dark and cruel, but now that they had found Eli, there was no going back. "Listen to me, Eli," Clara said firmly, taking the boy's trembling hands in hers. "We're not going to let anything happen to you. Not anymore." The sound of the approaching car grew louder, and Scout's growl deepened. Through the broken window, Clara could see Harlan Barrett's distinctive silhouette behind the wheel, unaware that his morning check was about to reveal that his cruel secret had finally been discovered. Clara and Dr. Granger carefully helped Eli into the back seat of the veterinarian's truck. The boy's face was pale and drawn, his clothes dirty and torn. The three-legged puppy jumped in beside him, pressing close as if to offer comfort. "We need to get him hydrated right away," Dr. Granger said, his voice tight with concern. "My clinic's closest. We can treat him there before deciding next steps." Clara sat in the back with Eli, gently supporting him as the truck bounced along the uneven road. Her heart ached seeing his condition. Dried tears had left tracks on his dusty cheeks, and his hands trembled slightly in his lap. "You're safe now, sweetheart," she whispered, smoothing his tangled hair. The maternal gesture came naturally, though it stirred memories of another child she'd once cared for. Her own son, Michael, lost too young to illness. She pushed the painful thoughts aside, focusing on the boy who needed her now. At the clinic, Dr. Granger quickly set up an IV while Clara helped Eli onto an exam table. "Small sips," she instructed, holding a water bottle to his cracked lips. The puppy remained vigilant at their feet, refusing to leave Eli's side. "My grandfather," Eli managed between sips, his voice hoarse. "He'll be so angry when he finds out." "Don't you worry about that right now," Clara assured him, though her own stomach churned with anxiety. Everyone knew Harlan Barrett's reputation in their small town. The wealthy landowner had a way of making problems disappear, usually through intimidation or his connections with local officials. As if summoned by their fears, the clinic's phone rang barely an hour later. Dr. Granger answered, his expression darkening as he listened. "It's already spreading through town. he said after hanging up. "Harlan knows Eli's been found." Right on cue, Clara's cell phone buzzed with a text message. "You had no right to trespass on my property or take my grandson. This isn't over." It was followed immediately by another. "You don't know what you're getting into, Clara Whitmore." She showed the messages to Dr. Granger, her hands shaking slightly. "He's trying to scare us into giving Eli back." "It wouldn't be the first time he's used threats to get his way," Dr. Granger agreed grimly. "Remember the Johnson family? They tried standing up to him over that property line dispute last year. Ended up moving away after their business mysteriously lost all its customers." Clara looked at Eli, who had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep on the exam table. The faithful puppy curled at his feet. Something fierce and protective rose in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced since her days as a mother. "I won't let him hurt this boy again," she said firmly. "Or this brave little dog who saved him." The clinic's door chimed, making them both jump. But it was only Mrs. Peterson from the diner across the street. Her kind face creased with worry. "I just heard," she whispered. "Harlan's at the coffee shop right now, telling everyone how you broke into his hunting cabin and kidnapped his grandson. He's threatening to press charges." Clara's phone buzzed again. Another message from Harlan. "You've got 1 hour to bring him back or you'll regret it. Don't test me, Clara." She deleted the message with trembling fingers, but kept her voice steady as she replied to Mrs. Peterson. "He locked that child in a cabin without food or water, all because Eli showed kindness to an injured puppy." She gestured to the three-legged dog, who thumped his tail against the floor at the attention. "The whole town knows what kind of man Harlan Barrett is," Dr. Granger added. "But everyone's too scared to stand up to him." "Well, maybe it's time someone did," Clara said, surprising herself with her own determination. She thought of all the times she'd stayed quiet in her grief, letting life pass her by after losing her family. But watching this brave little puppy fight so hard to save Eli had awakened something in her, a strength she'd forgotten she possessed. More threatening messages arrived, but Clara silenced her phone. Instead, she focused on tending to Eli, who was slowly regaining his color thanks to the IV fluids and rest. The boy's obvious fear of his grandfather only strengthened her resolve to protect him, no matter what Harlan Barrett might do. "We should contact the authorities," Dr. Granger suggested quietly. "Harlan has half the sheriff's department in his pocket," Clara replied. "But there must be someone who can help us stand up to him." She gazed down at Eli's sleeping face, remembering how it felt to be a mother with a child to protect. The pain of loss had made her cautious for so long, but now it was pushing her to be brave. Clara paced nervously in Dr. Granger's clinic waiting room, her fingers twisting together as she watched Eli sleep on the examination table. The three-legged puppy hadn't left the boy's side, maintaining a protective vigil that touched her heart. The peaceful moment shattered when the clinic's door burst open, making everyone jump. Harlan Barrett stormed in, his weathered face twisted with rage. "What do you think you're doing with my grandson?" He thrust a stack of papers at Clara. "I have full custody. You're interfering with my legal rights." Clara's hands trembled as she looked through the documents. Everything appeared official. Court stamps, notary seals, signed affidavits. Her stomach dropped. "These papers give you complete custody?" "That's right," Harlan sneered. "So step aside. The boy's coming home with me." Dr. Granger moved to stand between Harlan and Eli. "Mr. Barrett, Eli needs medical attention. He's severely dehydrated and showing signs of trauma." "I'll take him to a real doctor," Harlan spat. "Not some small-town vet who doesn't know his place." Clara felt the walls closing in. She knew Harlan's reputation. His money bought influence throughout the county. He'd crushed previous opponents in court with expensive lawyers and manufactured evidence. How could she fight someone who could simply buy whatever truth he wanted? "I'm calling the sheriff," Harlan threatened, pulling out his phone. "You'll both be arrested for kidnapping." Dr. Granger touched Clara's arm gently. "Give me 24 hours, he whispered. "Something about these papers doesn't feel right." That evening, while Clara stayed with Eli at the clinic, Dr. Granger drove to the county courthouse. He spent hours digging through records, making calls to colleagues in the legal system who owed him favors. Around midnight, his persistence paid off. "Clara," he said excitedly over the phone, "you need to see this. I'm heading back now." 30 minutes later, Lionel spread a different set of documents across the clinic's front desk. "These are the original custody papers filed after Sarah Barrett's death, Eli's mother. Look at the date." He pointed to a timestamp from 3 years ago. "And look at the named guardian." Clara's eyes widened as she read her own name. That's impossible." "Sarah Barrett was your student, wasn't she? Before she moved away?" Tears filled Clara's eyes as she remembered the quiet girl who'd spent countless lunch hours in her library. "Yes, she was so bright, so kind. When she left town pregnant at 17, it broke my heart. I tried to stay in touch, but—" "She never forgot you," Lionel said softly. "According to these records, she named you as Eli's guardian in case anything happened to her. She didn't trust her father with her son." Clara sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "But Harlan's papers are forgeries," Lionel confirmed. "Good ones, but forgeries nonetheless. The dates don't match up with courthouse records, and I found the original judge who handled Sarah's case. He confirmed everything." A small sound made them both turn. Eli stood in the doorway of the examination room, the puppy at his feet. "Is it true?" he asked in a small voice. "Did my mom want me to stay with Miss Clara?" Clara opened her arms and Eli ran into them. She hugged him close, feeling the rightness of it deep in her bones. "Your mother was very wise," she whispered, "and very brave, just like you." The puppy wagged his tail, pressing against their legs as if sealing their new family bond. "Harlan won't give up easily," Lionel warned. "But with these original documents, we have the law on our side. And I know plenty of people who'd love to see him finally face justice for his bullying." Clara looked down at Eli's hopeful face, feeling a fierce protectiveness surge through her. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was this boy's legal guardian, chosen by his mother. The responsibility settled on her shoulders like a mantle she'd been meant to wear all along. "We'll face whatever comes together," she said firmly, squeezing Eli's hand. The three-legged puppy barked once, as if in agreement, making them all smile despite the challenges ahead. Clara watched as Lionel carefully examined the custody papers, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Something's not right here," he muttered, pulling out his phone to make some calls. "Give me a few hours." Over the next few days, they began building their case. Clara reached out to Sarah Jenkins at the local diner, who had witnessed Harlan's previous outbursts. Tom Miller, the hardware store owner, quietly shared stories of Harlan's threats to foreclose on struggling farmers. Each person spoke in whispers, fear evident in their eyes. "We're gathering support," Lionel assured Clara over coffee at his clinic. People are tired of living under Harlan's shadow, but Harlan's response was swift and brutal. 2 men in a black pickup truck started following Clara on her drive to work. They lingered outside the library, their presence a constant reminder of Harlan's reach. Clara's hands shook as she locked up each evening, the sound of their engine, idling in the parking lot, making her heart race. One morning, Clara found her mailbox smashed, letters scattered across her front lawn. The next day, her tire was slashed. The message was clear: Harlan would not back down easily. "You need to be careful," Lionel warned, helping her change the flat tire. "Harlan's getting desperate." The breaking point came when Clara found the 3-legged puppy limping badly, clearly having been kicked. Fury replaced her fear. She drove straight to Harlan's sprawling farmhouse, gravel crunching under her tires as she pulled up to the wraparound porch. Harlan stood waiting, as if he'd expected her. "Come to surrender the boy?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. Clara marched up the steps, her hands balled into fists. "This isn't about Eli anymore, is it? This is about control. You can't stand that someone finally stood up to you." Harlan's facade cracked, revealing the rage beneath. "You think you can challenge me? I own this town. One word from me and you'll lose everything. Your job, your house, your reputation. That's where you're wrong," Clara shot back. "Your power only works if people stay afraid, but they're speaking up now, Harlan. They're sharing their stories." His face darkened. "You're playing a dangerous game, Clara. Ask around about what happened to the last person who crossed me. Is that what you told Eli's mother? Is that why she made sure you wouldn't get custody?" The words hit their mark. Harlan's composure shattered completely. He grabbed Clara's arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snarled. Clara wrenched free, stumbling backward. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. And so will everyone else when we're done." She turned and walked away, her heart pounding but her steps steady. Behind her, Harlan shouted, "This isn't over. You hear me? This isn't over by a long shot." Back at the clinic, Lionel cleaned the puppy's wounds while Clara recounted her confrontation. "He's escalating," Lionel said gravely. "We need to move faster." Clara nodded, watching the puppy nuzzle against Eli's hand as the boy slept. "Whatever it takes. We're not letting him win this time. That evening, as Clara drove home, she noticed not one but 3 vehicles tailing her. Harlan was making good on his threats, surrounding her with his hired muscle. But she refused to let fear win. She had something worth fighting for now, not just Eli's safety, but the chance to break Harlan's grip on the entire community. The next morning, Clara arrived at the library to find her office ransacked. Books were torn, papers scattered everywhere. Written on her desk in red paint were the words, "Back off." But instead of cowering, she picked up her phone and started taking pictures. Every act of intimidation was now evidence, another piece. In the case they were building against Harlan Barrett. The autumn evening settled over Clara's small farmhouse with an unsettling stillness. Inside, Clara tucked Eli into the guest bedroom that had become his temporary sanctuary, while the 3-legged puppy, whom Eli had named Scout, curled protectively at the foot of the bed. "Try to get some sleep, sweetheart," Clara whispered, smoothing Eli's dark hair. The boy nodded, his eyes heavy but still carrying traces of fear from the day's events. Clara settled into her living room armchair with a stack of legal documents Lionel had brought over. The tick of the grandfather clock and Scout's occasional soft snores were the only sounds breaking the silence. Around 11 o'clock, a strange smell caught her attention, acrid and threatening. Smoke. Clara bolted upright, her heart hammering against her ribs. Orange flames were already licking up the side of her house, visible through the kitchen window. The crackling sound grew louder, and dark smoke began seeping under the door. "Eli!" Clara screamed, running toward the guest room. "Wake up! Fire!" The boy was already sitting up, coughing as smoke filled the room. Scout barked frantically, pawing at the window. Clara grabbed Eli's hand, pulling him from the bed. "Cover your mouth with your shirt," she instructed, doing the same with her own clothing. They stumbled toward the front door, but the handle was scorching hot. The main exit was blocked. Clara heard engines running outside, multiple vehicles. This was no accident. "The back door!" she gasped, leading Eli through the thickening smoke. Their eyes stung, and Clara's lungs burned with each breath. Scout limped ahead of them, whimpering but determined. They reached the kitchen, but flames had already spread across the ceiling. Burning debris rained down, forcing them to crawl. Clara's mind raced. The cellar door. It led to outside steps. Their last chance. "Almost there," she encouraged Eli. who was crying silently beside her. The heat was unbearable now, and the roar of the fire drowned out all other sounds. Suddenly, Scout started barking furiously and bolted toward the front of the house. Through the flames, Clara saw shadows moving outside the windows. Harlan's men, making sure no one escaped. Scout's distraction worked. The men's attention turned toward the front of the house, where the puppy's barking led them on a chase. Clara seized the moment, yanking open the cellar door and helping Eli down the stairs. The cool night air hit their faces as they emerged from the cellar steps, but they weren't safe yet. Clara could hear angry shouts, and Scout's continued barking, closer now and punctuated by a sharp yelp of pain. "Scout!" Eli cried out, trying to run back. Clara held him tight. "We can't!" she choked out, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. "We have to run." They sprinted toward the tree line behind her property, the heat of the burning house pressing against their backs. Clara's legs trembled with each step, her lungs screaming for clean air. Behind them, she heard men shouting and the terrible sound of Scout whimpering. Through the trees, headlights suddenly cut through the darkness. Clara pushed Eli behind her, ready to fight, but it was Lionel's truck flying down the back road that bordered her property. He screeched to a halt beside them. "Get in!" he yelled, throwing open the passenger door. Clara lifted Eli into the truck, then turned back toward the house. "Scout!" she gasped. "He's still—" "I'll get him," Lionel promised, already running toward the burning building. Clara wanted to follow, but Eli's trembling form beside her kept her rooted in place. The minutes stretched like hours until finally Lionel emerged from the smoke carrying Scout's limp body. The puppy's fur was singed, and blood matted his right side, where one of Harlan's men had kicked him. They sped away into the night, the orange glow of Clara's burning home fading behind them. In the back seat, Eli cradled Scout, whispering prayers, while Clara checked the puppy's breathing. "He's alive," she assured Eli, though her voice shook. "We'll get him help." At the veterinary clinic, Lionel worked quickly to treat Scout's injuries, while Clara cleaned Eli's smoke-stained face in the bathroom. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Hair wild, face streaked with soot, eyes wide with lingering terror. "I can't protect him," she whispered, sliding down the wall to sit on the cold tile floor. "Harlan will stop at nothing. He almost killed us tonight." When she returned to the exam room, Lionel was finishing Scout's bandages. The puppy's breathing was steady now, though labored. "He's got some burns and bruising, but he'll pull through," Lionel reported. "He's a fighter." Clara gathered Eli in her arms as they watched Scout sleep. Everything they owned was gone, reduced to ashes in that inferno. But as she held the boy close, feeling his heart beat against hers, she knew the fire had taken something else too, her last shred of hesitation. "We can't stay here," she said quietly to Lionel. "Not in town. Not while Harlan has this much power." Lionel nodded grimly, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "I know, but running isn't the answer either. We need to fight back, the right way." Clara looked down at Scout, at the brave little puppy who had saved their lives by putting his own at risk. She thought of her burning home, of all the others Harlan had terrorized into submission over the years. "We will," she said, her voice hoarse from smoke but firm with resolve. "But first, we need to get somewhere safe. All of us." Scout stirred. In his sleep, whimpering softly, Eli reached out to stroke his singed fur, and the puppy's tail thumped weakly against the exam table. Even injured and exhausted, he was still trying to protect them. Clara's hands wouldn't stop shaking as the adrenaline slowly faded. The night's horrors played on repeat in her mind. The heat, the smoke, the terrible knowledge that someone had tried to burn them alive. But beneath the fear, a steely determination took root. Harlan Barrett had just shown his true colors in the most devastating way possible. Clara sat in the sterile courthouse hallway, her hands trembling as she clutched a steaming cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The polished marble floors and imposing wooden doors seemed to mock her efforts at justice. Just yesterday, she'd been granted temporary custody of Eli, but Harlan's legal team had already filed multiple motions to overturn the decision. "Miss Whitmore?" A court clerk appeared, her face carefully neutral. "Judge Henderson would like to see all parties in his chambers." Clara's heart sank. These private meetings usually meant bad news. She glanced at Lionel, who squeezed her shoulder, reassuringly, before they followed the clerk down the echoing hallway. Inside the judge's chambers, Harlan Barrett sat with his expensive lawyer, looking smug in his tailored suit. The contrast between his polished appearance and the cruel reality of his actions made Clara's stomach turn. Judge Henderson cleared his throat. "I've reviewed the new evidence presented by Mr. Barrett's team. There appear to be inconsistencies in the original guardianship documents." "Your Honor," Clara's lawyer protested, "those documents were verified by a notary who conveniently passed away last year," Harlan's lawyer interrupted smoothly, "and we have witnesses who will testify that Eli's mother never intended such an arrangement." Clara felt the room spin. She thought of Eli waiting at Lionel's house with his beloved three-legged puppy, both still recovering from their injuries in the fire. The dog's bandaged leg and singed fur were constant reminders of how close they'd come to losing everything. "Given these developments," Judge Henderson continued, "I'm inclined to grant Mr. Barrett's motion for immediate custody return." The words hit Clara like physical blows. She watched helplessly as Harlan's lips curved into a victor's smile. Later, that evening, Clara sat in Lionel's living room watching Eli sleep on the couch with his puppy curled protectively against him. The dog's injuries from the fire had left him even more vulnerable, yet he remained faithful to his young friend. "I can't fight him anymore," Clara whispered, her voice breaking. "He's too powerful, too connected. Every time we make progress, he finds another way to twist things in his favor." Lionel set down 2 mugs of tea on the coffee table. "Clara, you can't give up now. That boy needs you. What good am I to him if I can't protect him?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Look what happened to our home. Look what happened to this sweet dog who tried to save us. I'm just a school librarian going up against a man who owns half the county. The—" Puppy lifted his head, whimpering softly as if sensing her distress. His bandaged leg trembled as he tried to stand, mirror her own exhausted struggle. "You're more than just a librarian," Lionel said firmly. "You're the woman who followed a 3-legged dog to save a boy nobody knew was missing. You're the person who opened her heart and home without hesitation. That means something, Clara," and shook her head, watching as Eli stirred in his sleep. "But what if meaning something isn't enough? What if doing the right thing doesn't matter in a world where money talks louder than truth?" "Then we make it matter," Lionel replied, his quiet conviction cutting through her despair. "We fight harder. We find another way." "How?" Clara asked, her voice small. "Together," Lionel said, reaching for her hand. "You're not alone in this anymore, Clara. And neither is Eli." The puppy managed to limp over to Clara, resting his head on her knee. Despite his pain, his eyes held the same determination she'd seen when he'd first led her to Eli. It was a reminder of how this all began, with one small creature's unwavering resolve to help someone in need. "You know what I see when I look at this dog?" Lionel continued. "I see someone who didn't let missing a leg stop him from saving Eli. He didn't let his size stop him from standing up to Harlan's men during the fire. And he's not letting his injuries stop him from protecting Eli now." Clara stroked the puppy's head, feeling his steady warmth against her leg. She thought about how this brave little animal had never given up, even when the odds seemed impossible. "Maybe that's what real strength is," Lionel said softly. "Not having all the power or advantages, but refusing to back down when something matters enough." As if in response, The puppy gave a quiet bark, making Eli smile in his sleep. The sight squeezed Clara's heart, this makeshift family they'd become, all carrying their own wounds but still standing together. "Harlan thinks his money and influence make him invincible," Clara said slowly, straightening her shoulders. "But he's never had to fight for anything that truly matters. Not like we have." Lionel smiled, seeing the spark return to her eyes. "No, he hasn't. And that's his weakness, not his strength." Clara looked at Eli, peaceful in sleep despite everything he'd endured. She thought of his mother, who had trusted her with this precious responsibility. The weight of that trust felt different. Now, not like a burden, but like armor. "We'll need a new strategy," she said, her voice stronger. "One that Harlan won't see coming." The courthouse loomed before Clara like a mountain she had to climb. She clutched a thick folder of documents to her chest, each page representing another piece of evidence against Harlan Barrett. Lionel stood beside her on the courthouse steps, his quiet strength helping steady her nerves. "Remember," he said softly, "we have truth on our side." Inside the courtroom, Clara watched as Harlan strutted to his seat, expensive suit gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His confidence seemed to fill the room, but she noticed something different in his eyes today, a flicker of uncertainty. Judge Henderson called the court to order, her gavel echoing through the hushed chamber. "This hearing will determine the permanent custody arrangement for Eli Barrett, as well as address serious allegations of criminal conduct." Clara's attorney, Sarah Matthews, began methodically presenting their case. First came the medical records. Documentation of Eli's injuries from being locked in the cabin, photos of his dehydration and malnutrition. Dr. Lionel Granger took the stand, his testimony clear and unwavering. "The boy showed signs of prolonged neglect," Lionel stated firmly. "And when I examined him again after the house fire, I found evidence of smoke inhalation that could have been fatal." Harlan's lawyer tried to object, but Judge Henderson overruled him. Next came the fire marshal's report, detailing how the blaze had been deliberately set. Security camera footage from a neighbor's house showed two men approaching Clara's home that night, men who were now prepared to testify against their employer. "Mr. Marcus," Sarah addressed one of the men, "did Harlan Barrett hire you to set that fire?" The man shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, ma'am. Said he wanted to send a message. Said nobody crosses Harlan Barrett and gets away with it." Harlan's face turned purple with rage. His lawyer frantically whispered in his ear, but he shoved the man away. Then came the financial records. Clara watched as her attorney laid bare years of Harlan's fraudulent dealings, falsified custody documents, bribes paid to local officials, money trails leading to countless acts of intimidation against anyone who dared stand against him. "Your Honor," Sarah continued, "we have documented evidence of at least 15 instances where Mr. Barrett used his wealth and influence to circumvent the law." More witnesses came forward, townspeople who had suffered under Harlan's reign of corruption. Each testimony built upon the last, creating an undeniable pattern of abuse of power. Finally, Clara took the stand. Her hands trembled as she was sworn in, but her voice remained steady. "Ms. Whitmore," Sarah began, "please tell the court about the day you found Eli." Clara described following the three-legged puppy to the cabin, finding Eli locked inside, barely alive. She detailed the weeks of threats and intimidation that followed, the burning of her home, the constant fear. "But you didn't give up," Sarah prompted. "No," Clara replied, looking directly at Harlan, "because some things matter more than being afraid. Eli matters more." Harlan couldn't contain himself any longer. He jumped to his feet, face contorted with rage. "This is ridiculous. You're all lying. I own this town. You can't do this to me." "Mr. Barrett," Judge Henderson's voice cracked like thunder, "sit down, or I will have you removed." The outburst seemed to break something in the courtroom. The facade of Harlan's respectability crumbled, revealing the truth of his character for all to see. After a brief recess, Judge Henderson delivered her ruling. The evidence presented today reveals a disturbing pattern of criminal behavior and abuse of power. I am hereby granting full permanent custody of Eli Barrett to Clara Whitmore, as per his mother's original wishes. Clara's heart soared as the judge continued. Furthermore, I am ordering the immediate arrest of Harlan Barrett on charges of attempted murder, arson, child endangerment, and multiple counts of fraud. Two deputies stepped forward as Judge Henderson spoke. Mr. Barrett, you will surrender yourself into custody. Harlan's face went slack with shock as the deputies approached. For the first time in his life, his money couldn't buy his way out. His power couldn't intimidate the truth into silence. As they led him away in handcuffs, Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Not from fear this time, but from relief. Lionel's arm wrapped around her shoulders, and she leaned into his support. Eli, who had been waiting outside with his beloved three-legged puppy, burst through the courtroom doors. He ran straight into Clara's arms, the puppy limping quickly behind him. "Is it over?" Eli whispered against her shoulder. "Can I stay with you forever now?" Clara held him tight, feeling the weight of fear finally lifting from her shoulders. "Yes, sweetheart. It's over. We're going to be okay." The puppy barked once, tail wagging, as if confirming her words. Justice had finally prevailed over corruption, truth over power, love over fear. In this moment, watching Harlan being led away in handcuffs, Clara knew that sometimes the smallest creatures could inspire the greatest courage, and that doing what was right mattered more than all the money in the world. The autumn sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows of Clara's new home, casting warm shadows across the freshly painted walls. 2 weeks had passed since Harlan's arrest, and life was slowly finding its rhythm again. The insurance money from her burned house had allowed her to purchase a cozy craftsman-style home closer to town, with plenty of room for their expanding family. Clara stood at the counter preparing breakfast, while watching Eli in the backyard through the window. The 11-year-old boy was throwing a tennis ball for the three-legged puppy, who had been officially named Hero. Despite his limp, Hero bounded after the ball with infectious enthusiasm, his recovery from the fire injuries nearly complete. "He's getting faster every day." Lionel's warm voice came from behind her. He had started dropping by most mornings, checking on Hero's recovery and sharing coffee before heading to his veterinary clinic. Clara turned, smiling at the sight of him. "The physical therapy exercises you recommended are working wonders." "Hero's a fighter," Lionel said, stepping closer. "Just like his family." The word family made Clara's heart flutter. So much had changed since that first morning when Hero had appeared on her doorstep. The official guardianship papers for Eli sat proudly framed on her desk, next to Hero's adoption certificate that listed both her and Lionel as his caregivers. "I've been thinking," Lionel said, his voice softer now. He reached for her hand, and Clara felt the familiar warmth of his touch. "About family, and second chances, and how sometimes the most unexpected things can lead us exactly where we need to be." Clara's breath caught as Lionel's green eyes met hers. Outside, Eli's laughter mingled with Hero's playful barks. "Clara," Lionel continued, "watching you fight for Eli, seeing your courage and your heart, I realized something. I realized I was falling in love with you. Not just because of your bravery, but because you showed me what hope looks like. You reminded me that good things can grow from broken places." Tears welled in Clara's eyes as Lionel's words touched something deep within her soul. Since losing her husband 5 years ago, she had built walls around her heart, found safety in solitude. But now those walls were crumbling, and she wasn't afraid. "You gave me hope too," she whispered. "When everything was darkest, you stood beside me. You believed in me when I stopped believing in myself." Lionel brushed away a tear from her cheek. I love you, Clara Whitmore. You and Eli and our three-legged wonder out there. You're the family I never knew I was waiting for. Clara's answer came not in words, but in the way she moved into his embrace, the way her lips found his in a kiss that felt like coming home. Through the window, she heard Eli's voice call out, "Finally!" They broke apart, laughing, to find Eli, and Hero watching them from the doorway. The boy's grin stretched from ear to ear, Hero's tail wagging in apparent approval. "Does this mean Dr. Lionel's going to be around more?" Eli asked, hope bright in his eyes. Clara looked at Lionel, seeing, her own joy reflected in his expression. "I think it does, sweetheart." Eli rushed forward, throwing his arms around them both. Hero limped over, pressing against their legs, completing their circle. Clara felt overwhelming gratitude wash over her, for the puppy who had led her to Eli, for Lionel's unwavering support, for second chances at love and family. "Group hug," Eli declared, squeezing tighter. In that moment, Clara understood that sometimes the greatest gifts come in unexpected packages. A three-legged puppy had led her not just to save a child, but to heal her own heart. She had gained more than custody of Eli. She had found a new purpose, a new love, a new family built from courage and hope and unwavering loyalty. Hero barked once, tail still wagging, as if to say this was exactly how things were meant to be. Clara knelt down to scratch behind his ears, whispering, "Thank you for finding us, sweet boy." The morning sunlight wrapped around them like a blessing, illuminating their little family, the brave librarian, the compassionate veterinarian, the resilient boy and the heroic puppy who had brought them all together. In their embrace, Clara felt the last pieces of her heart click into place, completing a picture more beautiful than she could have imagined. Love, she realized, could bloom from the most unexpected circumstances, and family wasn't always about blood. Sometimes it was about the connections forged through courage, kindness, and the willingness to fight for what matters most. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay.